Marcus, more on the economic fallout from the uncertainty surrounding Ukraine at the moment.
Yeah, Ukraine's new Prime Minister Arseniy Yatsenyuk certainly has his work cut out to turn the economy around in Ukraine. He's already warned that unpopular measures will be needed to get the economy back on track. Speaking to Parliament, it appears that we're having an audio problem.
Oh, we're having a small technical problem. We'll get the business for you in a moment. But let's get the latest in our special series to coincide with the International Agricultural Fair. And today our team have been in Lebanon, finding out how farmers are coping there with a very difficult situation.
Hello and welcome to France 24's special edition from the Paris Farm Show. One of the motors of agriculture's development has of course been innovation, as farmers have swapped horsepower for tractors. What next for the 21st century? Flying farmers? Take a look. No, it's not a video game or a UFO, but a chance to hone your drone skills. The €26,000 price tag may seem steep, but for this farmer from southwest France, this agricultural drone could mean long-term savings.
It'll allow us to get an overview of the land more quickly. The aerial view means we can better see things, how the crop is growing, if there's any disease, if there's enough fertilizer. So it could be potentially interesting for us.
The prototype of this drone was built 4 years ago in a barn. Now it's being marketed as one of the world's first drones to be equipped with specialized agricultural sensors. Likened to a smartphone with wings, it uses GPS and infrared to analyze the farmland and the crop's color from above. And as it can give rapid overviews of large areas up to 50 kilometers squared at a time, the makers are also targeting the international market, including Africa.
There isn't as much very precise satellite coverage in these areas as there is in Western Europe. What we're offering African countries is a made-to-measure satellite coverage, and one at a scale that is tailored for them.
The innovation isn't only in the air, it's also very much on terra firma. This grape harvesting machine costs €250,000 and is stuffed with sensors and cameras. The driver controls everything via a touchscreen and a joystick. French manufacturers insist increasingly automated equipment can be a boon for farmers.
Labor productivity, increased yield, comfort, those are the things the users are looking for. If it's also economically beneficial because they use less fuel, less fertilizer, or they increase their output, well, it's beneficial for everyone.
France is Europe's leading farming nation, meaning it needs to capitalize on the growing demand for high-tech workhorses. For now, only 12% of the EU's farming vehicles are made in France. Now, how do you farm in the shadow of civil war? Lebanon's Bekaa Valley is on the border with Syria. Many farmers can't reach their land for security reasons, but sales are up as production in Syria hits rock bottom. Salim El Madeb, Shireen Yazbek and Lucy Fielder report.
Al-Qaa, in the far north of the Bekaa Plain, the last village before Syria. Asad al-Tawn owns 45 hectares of land, part of which straddles the Syrian border, but he has no chance of getting there now. Behind these mountains, the Syrian army has just launched an assault on the rebel region of Yabrud. The explosions can be heard miles away. Here, farmers have lost on average a third of their revenue, partly because of the insecurity, but also because they can no longer buy cheap supplies in Syria.
Because I live on the border, I used to benefit from the highly competitive prices of agricultural materials over there. They were really cheap, costing about half of what we pay here.
Away from the border, it's a different picture. On the whole, Lebanese farmers are profiting from the Syrian crisis. Georges Sakar grows potatoes, the Bekaa Valley's premier crop. In 2013, Syrian production fell to just a quarter of the year before. A vacuum soon filled by Lebanese growers.
With the events in Syria, Lebanon has started to export to Iraq, to the Gulf, to Jordan, and even to Syria because its production has collapsed.
The hills of Deir al-Ahmar, the centre of hashish production. This sector too has reaped gains from Syria's war. But in these fields, the vine has supplanted cannabis, thanks to an initiative supported by the French Department of l'Oise.
Even if the hashish trade is doing well because of the war in Syria and the instability here, we don't regret the conversion at all, because grape sales yield high revenues.
Another consequence of the crisis, with the influx of refugees, the cost of labour has plummeted. But this year, the harvest nonetheless faces a grave threat. Winter was exceptionally dry. Snow barely dusted the mountains. The risk of drought is extremely high.
That's all for now. Coming up in the next edition, making dinner from produce only from in and around Paris, as well as a closer look at farming in Algeria. Until then, goodbye.
Yes, do not miss Luke Brown's fifth and final reports on farming tomorrow at the same time. Well, we can get now back to the business news. Marcus Carlson is here. His technical problems resolved.
You can hear me this time
we can hear you this time. You were telling us about the economic fallout from all of this uncertainty in Ukraine.
Yes, let's return to that issue. Ukraine's new Prime Minister Arseniy Yatsenyuk certainly has his work cut out to turn the Ukrainian economy around. He's already warned that unpopular measures will be needed to get the economy back on track. Speaking earlier in Kiev, he accused Viktor Yanukovych of stealing billions. He said loans worth some $37 billion had gone missing from state coffers under the now former president. Yatsenyuk said Ukraine is in urgent need of loans from the International Monetary Fund to cover the holes left by Yanukovych. The Ukrainian Finance Ministry has said that Ukraine needs some $35 billion over the next 2 years in order to tie itself over financially. The IMF, on its side, is sending a team to Ukraine to discuss financial aid. In a statement, IMF chief Christine Lagarde says the fund is ready to respond. The question is what conditions it will set, though. Ukrainian officials have previously been skeptical to IMF calls to cut subsidies for natural gas, but a spokesman for the fund signals that Ukraine is ready to change its mind.
The letter we've just received from the Ukrainian authorities does indicate that the new leadership is committed to implement wide-ranging reform.
Let's move on now. Cold weather could be behind recent signs of weakness in the U.S. economy. That's according to the head of the Federal Reserve, Janet Yellen. She was testifying in the U.S. Senate earlier to senators. It follows a string of underwhelming reports that have sparked questions on the strength of the U.S. recovery. Yellen also signaled that jobless levels are still too high for the Fed to raise interest rates.
Those out of a job more than 6 months continue to make up an unusually large fraction of the unemployed. And the number of people who are working part-time but would prefer a full-time job remains very high.
Now, the idea that cold weather is to blame for a weaker U.S. economy seems to be a relief for investors. At least they don't have other things to worry about, deeper and more profound issues, perhaps. If we take a look at the stock markets this hour, we're seeing stocks trading to the upside after Yellen's testimony. The Dow Jones Industrial Average up by around about 0.3%. In Europe earlier, it was more of a mixed picture at the close. The crisis in Ukraine seemed to be weighing on the indices, as there are fears of Russia wading into the turmoil. That in particular was seen to be weighing on the DAX in Frankfurt at the close. It was down around about 0.8%. If we take a look at some individual company news, the Royal Bank of Scotland has unveiled plans to cut costs and streamline its business. It came as the British lender reported a whopper of a loss of £8.2 billion for 2013. RBS says it will focus on Britain, rolling back its global ambitions. The bank was bailed out by British taxpayers in 2008 and is 81% state-owned. RBS shares, they were down almost 8% at the close in London. Here in France, meanwhile, shares in nuclear company Areva plunged almost 14%. It comes after Areva reported a net loss for 2013 of almost €500 million. It was the third consecutive year in the red. The French company says it's taken heavy charges for a contract to build a new reactor in Finland. And private equity firm Blackstone is buying a 20% stake in Versace. Overall, Blackstone is paying €210 million for new and existing shares. The deal values the Italian fashion house at around €1 billion. The Versace family says it will remain at the heart of the brand. We're going to turn to Barcelona finally. The Mobile World Congress is just coming to an end there. The event gave us some clues on the next generation of smartphones and other gadgets. One of the themes this year was health, as Delana de Souza explains.
The tech industry takes a shot at the health conscious at the Mobile World Congress. French firm Citizen Sciences is showcasing a smart sensing fabric. Invisible to the naked eye, sensors measure users' heart rate, body heat and breathing. The information is relayed live to a smartphone, and it's not only aimed at elite athletes.
Very useful for, of course, to follow the healthcare problems.
Devices unveiled in Barcelona measure everything from sleep patterns to calorie intake. This is billed as the world's first smartphone-connected toothbrush. It tells users where and how to brush and for how long. The tech industry is looking for ways to make smartphones a bigger part of our lives.
Whereas previously it was about, I don't know, voice and text and playing Angry Birds and all of these sorts of more mundane and maybe not critical systems. And increasingly it's becoming critical. So
the greater focus on health is seen as a play for a consumer that's always online. This as traditional services like calls and texts are declining. The question is whether it'll be a hit or miss with consumers.
All right, on that healthy note, I suppose it's a healthy note, I'm going to hand it back to Laura for the rest of the news. Laura.
OK, Marcus, thanks very much indeed. Well, do stay with us here on France 24. When I come back after the break, I'll be speaking to Mark Regev, the spokesman for the Israeli government, about a new report from Amnesty International which claims Israeli forces are using excessive force against Palestinians in the West Bank. We'll have his response to that coming up next.